Battlemechs may receive the lion's share of glory and attention in the 41st and 42nd centuries. But the far more common and even ubiquitous machinery of war across the galaxy are vehicles. These could be everything from the wheeled truck with an improvised recoilless rifle on the back to a mainline battle tank that can carry a litany of weapons usually seen on battlemechs. Most people would see these vehicles far more often than they would ever see a battlemech, if we don't count holovids and video of far-off battles and Solaris matches. With the latest Battletech Kickstarter on the distant horizon, I received a request to create a how-to video for incorporating vehicles into your tabletop Battletech play. The good news is that it's pretty easy, and you'll be out doing your best impersonation of an armored battalion or Clan Hell's Horses Galaxy in no time. For the purposes of this video, I think it would be most helpful to walk through and highlight some specific differences between how the rules deal with mechs versus vehicles. It would also be a good idea if you have a passing familiarity with the Battletech rules, as I will not be spending too much time on the similarities between a mech and vehicle. For the initiative phase, no differences. Mechs treated the same as vehicles. They each are one individual unit. For the movement phase, combat vehicles move just like mechs do, with some minor limitations and alterations. Your record sheet for the vehicle will have a cruising speed and a flank speed. These are the equivalent of your walking versus running values for a battlemech. While they cannot mix travel at cruising and flanking speed at the same time, vehicles can move forward and backward so long as they are traveling at cruising speed. This fits with our understanding of mechs not walking backwards at running speed. Isn't it nice when the rules are consistent and make sense? Are you paying attention, Games Workshop? There's some limitations and types of hexes and certain vehicles can travel into and across. The main difference between these vehicles is tracked versus wheeled transport. Wheeled vehicles cannot enter rough terrain, rubble, light or heavy wood hexes. No ground vehicles can travel deeper than depth 0 water. Tracked vehicles are limited from traveling into heavy woods and depth 1+ water, but can otherwise traverse the same map hexes as battlemechs. Concerning changing elevations, vehicles are limited for moving more than one elevation in a turn. This is a change from mech rules, as battlemechs can typically move up and down up to 2 elevation levels in a turn. If the vehicle has a turret, it can turn to face the target in the same way that mechs turn during the reaction phase. Driving skill rolls are taken for vehicle crews to avoid skidding, side slips, and to avoid taking damage from entering a building. Skidding can occur when a vehicle makes a facing change while on a paved hex and continues moving into another hex. The player must roll a driving skill check, modifying the original driving skill number by the number of hexes moved during the turn, up to the point that the vehicle changed directions. If the roll is below what the driver needs, the vehicle will continue moving in the original direction for the number of hexes it traveled before the skid, divided by 2, rounded up. So after a skid, any remaining movement points are reduced to 0. On the bright side, any attacks against a skidding vehicle have a +2 to hit modifier. Kind of hard to hit the vehicle that's skidding out of the way. On the downside, any attacks made by that skidding vehicle have a +1 to hit modifier. If fate deals you an extremely rough hand, you could collide with a building or unit. If that happens, the vehicle takes damage on the side of contact. If you hit a building, the building can also take damage as if it were charged. The vehicle takes damage equal to the building's current CF divided by 10, rounding up. There are some added rules here for what happens if the building is knocked down and you have enough movement points remaining, but I think it's getting too far out into the weeds for an introduction video. If you want to dive into those specific rules, check out the Total War sourcebook. If a vehicle has a unit in the way of its skidding, it must roll as if it's making a charging attack, with all the standard modifiers for an unintended charge. The skidding vehicle is going to take 1 point of damage on the collision side for every 10 points that the charged unit weighs, applied in 5-point groupings. Charging damage is also applied to the unit struck by the vehicle. If the unintentional charge roll fails, the vehicle will just continue to skid beyond that unit. It just keeps going. For the combat phase, the rules for vehicles firing at targets mirror those of mechs, and there's a relief. As far as taking fire goes, determining where shots hit on a tank is quite simple. The ground vehicle hit location table has 3 columns on it, a front, a back, and a side column. The diagram shown above on the screen informs the players where the damage needs to be recorded. For example, if a mech is firing at the front of a vehicle and rolls a 5, the damage would be allocated to the armor in the front of the vehicle. If the roll was an 11, it would hit the turret armor. If the vehicle doesn't have a turret, all hits on the turret are just allocated to the armor from the side it was attacked. Critical hits against a vehicle are handled in a similar manner to mechs. There is a vehicle critical hits table that's rolled on with a 2d6. If the rolled number doesn't apply to that section, it goes down the list to the next item until something is destroyed. If you make it all the way to 12, it circles back to 2, which just so happens to not be a critical hit on anything. While I'm not going to outline all the possible effects of critical hits, I do want to highlight some of them just so you have a good idea of the types of things that can happen to a vehicle. If you want the full list, they're available in the Total War sourcebook. Critical hits on ammunition function like with mechs, though all of the vehicle's ammunition will explode and not just one section of it like on a mech. That could be a very big boom. The damage is applied to the internal structure of the location struck. If there is a case on the vehicle, the damage is instead applied to the rear armor with any additional damage ignored as it was vented out the back of the vehicle. If a crew stunned critical hit is rolled, the crew inside the vehicle are feeling the negative effects of a traumatic hit to the vehicle. In the turn following this critical hit, the vehicle can only move at cruising speed and cannot fire on any targets. In the case of a critical hit on a vehicle's fuel tank, it causes the vehicle to explode, killing any crew, infantry, and destroying the cargo inside. This applies only to vehicles with an internal combustion engine. If you are using a vehicle that is powered by a fusion reactor, that's going to suffer an engine hit instead. In the case of an engine hit, that vehicle loses its ability to move, change facing, and any other energy weapons on it no longer work. Additionally, if the vehicle has a turret, that turret no longer is capable of turning and must stay pointed in the direction that it was in that turn. Vehicles with an engine hit are considered immobile targets. Now let's look at an example of a turn and see how things go for our tank here. Now we're going to proxy this tank and say that it's a Bulldog, which is a 60-ton tank with a cruise speed of 4 and a flank speed of 6. It is armed with a large laser in the turret, 2 SRM-4s, and a machine gun. It fires first at this Marauder 2C and does some light damage to the torso and leg. So far, nothing out of the ordinary for a Battletech combat phase. However, now it's the Marauder 2C's turn to shoot. It fires both ERPPCs at the tank. The player rolls and both weapons hit. From the angle of attack, we're going to consult the side column of the ground combat vehicle hit location table. The first location roll for damage is a 10. That damage is allocated to the turret of our Bulldog, since it has a turret. The second roll in the location is a 3, which we can see as the side armor. 15 points of damage are allocated to that side. Unfortunately, the tank has already suffered some damage from earlier in the battle, and the armor is breached. The attacking player now rolls a 2d6 and looks at the ground combat vehicle critical hits table. The player has rolled a 9, which is a stabilizer hit. For the rest of the battle, the Bulldog would have to double their attacking movement to hit modifier for any weapons on that side because of the damage system that keeps weapons steady. Thankfully, the Bulldog doesn't have any weapons mounted on that right side. Unfortunately, since the critical hit doesn't apply to that Bulldog, we have to move on to the next one on the list, which is Weapon Destroyed. Now, the Bulldog doesn't have any weapons on the right side, so we shift downward again, resulting in an engine hit. The Bulldog's engine is now severely damaged, and it will not be able to move or shoot its large laser for the rest of the battle. Sorry, little Bulldog. There are some optional and more in-depth vehicle rules that can come into play in specific situations, but for the most part, what we've covered in this video can get you through the most basic battles on the table with vehicles. If you want a definitive source, the Battletech Total Warfare Sourcebook is the place to go for the full rules. The original compendium does have vehicle rules, but it should be noted that the vehicle damage table has changed slightly since that book was printed to be just 2 columns at the front and the back combined. As I hope the video demonstrated, adding vehicles to your tabletop Battletech games shouldn't be intimidating. Adding combined arms units can generate some spice in your play sessions. Just wait till we do the elemental armored infantry video. Oh boy. Have you had some experiences playing with vehicles in your games? I know everyone seems to have a Savannah Master story, and I know there are more out there after discussing this a bit on Discord and Twitter. Let me know in the comments. I love hearing your Battletech stories. If you want more to watch, check out the Why Do We Love Lasers video, linked up above for some discussion of why we love the zaps and the pew-pews. Take care, and go make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.